My daughter-in-law texted, "We're flying just the two of us. Could you dog sit instead? That way, we wouldn't have to worry about picking him up." After booking the Aspen cabin, the flights, and all the Christmas details, I replaced their names on the booking app the night before departure. Their names disappeared. The cabin didn't. The text from my son at 9:47 p.m. was still there. "Jess thinks it'll be less stressful if you don't come. We want this to be our special trip. They are trying to erase me from the vacation I have been planning, paying for, and looking forward to for a long time. Chicago winters are brutal. And anyone who has lived through one will tell you it is a season that demands warmth of the body and of the heart. For me, the second was harder to find. I was 62 now, a retired teacher, and for the last 4 Christmases, a widow. The nights could still feel long, the silence pressing in around me when I reached out for the space beside me and found only emptiness. But grief, like the snow, settles eventually. And I had begun to believe that perhaps joy could be rebuilt, one careful step at a time. That is how the idea came to me. If I could not bring my husband back, perhaps I could bring my family closer. My only son, Cole, and his wife Cassidy, both busy, both drifting further into the orbit of their own lives. Maybe all they needed was the right occasion, a place where the air itself insisted on togetherness. So I decided, this Christmas, we would celebrate not in Chicago, but in Aspen, Colorado. I had spent days scrolling through listings until I found the cabin that looked as though it had stepped straight out of a snow globe. Dark timber walls that stood strong against the whiteness, large windows opening onto mountains powdered with snow, and inside a stone fireplace with a mantel already dressed in holly. A grand tree strung with lights, even little details like plaid throws and rustic rocking chairs. It wasn't modern in the cold, polished way hotels try to be. It was traditional, alive with the promise of family memories. That was exactly what I wanted. I booked it without hesitation. The flights to Chicago to Denver, then the short hop into Aspen. I added sleigh rides, a dinner reservation at a lodge famous for its roast turkey, even ski passes, though I doubted I would use them myself. My savings could bear it. What was money for, if not for moments that stitched people together? When I imagined it, I could almost see it playing out before my eyes, like a reel from an old film. Cole, laughing with a mug of hot cocoa, his face lit by the glow of the fire. Cassidy, her sharp edges softened for once by candlelight, perhaps even leaning over to help me with the ornaments. And me, not alone this time, but surrounded, needed, part of something whole. I could almost hear my husband's voice saying, "Yes, Miriam. This is how you keep the family together." I sent them the details, my heart thudding with the strange mix of excitement and vulnerability that comes with giving a gift that means more than its cost. For a few hours there was silence, and then the first message arrived. It was from Cassidy. She wrote, "The cabin looks nice, but isn't it a little too rustic? I mean, is there at least a spa nearby? We wouldn't want to be stuck indoors the whole time." I stared at the words on my phone. A small crack ran across the snow globe I had built in my mind. It was subtle, but it was there. And I felt it in my chest, the first note of tension in what I had hoped would be our symphony of Christmas. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Cassidy's remark about a spa had landed like a pebble in a still pond, but I thought the ripples would fade. Surely, once she saw the cabin with its snowy charm, she would understand what I was trying to create. After all, this was Christmas, not just another vacation. But the texts kept coming, each one sharper than the last. "Is there a spa nearby? We can't just sit in a cabin all day." But I read that one 3 times, the words drilling into my chest. A cabin in Aspen, with mountains at the doorstep, fireplaces, sleigh rides, and she was worried about being stuck indoors. It felt as though every ounce of my effort was being measured against a checklist of her comforts, not against the love with which it was given. Then came the line that made me put my phone down on the table and walk away, my hands trembling slightly. "Maybe it's better if you stay home with Max. Flying at your age can be exhausting." Our Labrador, Max. Their dog, not mine. And my age, which suddenly seemed less like a number and more like a barrier she wanted to put between me and my own son. It was framed as a joke, but the cruelty was there, thinly veiled. I confronted Cole, though not with anger, more with a desperate need for reassurance. Cole, is this really what she means? Do you both want me to stay behind? He sighed in that way he always did when tension rose. Mom, Jess just wants what's best for everyone. She worries about you, that's all. Jess. He still called her that, as if softening her name could soften her nature. But his tone, apologetic, evasive, told me the truth. He wasn't defending me. He was defending her. It left me uneasy, but I clung stubbornly to the dream I had built. The cabin confirmation arrived in my inbox, and I opened it like a child opening a present. The pictures scrolled across my screen, the timber walls, the wreath on the front door, the Christmas tree already strung with lights. I could almost smell pine needles and cinnamon. I imagined unpacking stockings, hanging them by the fireplace the way I once had with Cole's father by my side. In my mind, the cabin was still a stage where our fractured family might find harmony again. Yet even as I clung to that vision, the reality was slipping from my grasp. Cassidy began referring to the trip as their special getaway. In her messages, it was always, "We can't wait to ski," or "our time in Aspen." Not "our family trip," not "Christmas together." Slowly, steadily, she was erasing me from the picture I had painted. Cole never corrected her. His silences were worse than her words. Because silence from your own child can feel like betrayal, dressed as neutrality. I began to sense, with the slow dread of someone watching a crack spread across glass, that I was no longer welcome on the holiday I had dreamed up, planned, and paid for. My gift was being twisted, reshaped into something else entirely, something where I had no place. That night, I sat down at my dining table, my laptop glowing in the dark kitchen. I clicked open the airline confirmation, then the Airbnb booking. My eyes drifted over the details, the cabin, the dates, the seats, and then I saw it, almost like the universe had underlined it for me. Primary account holder, Miriam Cross. My name, not theirs. My booking, my payment, my control. The snow globe might have been cracking, but in that single detail, I felt the faintest spark of power. I closed the laptop, the thought tucked carefully away in my mind, waiting. It was a Tuesday evening when the group chat lit up. I had just settled down with a cup of tea, the snow drifting lazily past the Chicago window panes, when Cassidy's message appeared. At first, I didn't quite understand what I was looking at. It was a glossy little mock-up, a travel itinerary she had designed like one of her marketing projects. The title at the top read, "Our Aspen Trip." Below it, there were photos of her and Cole in ski gear, smiling, stylish, their Labrador Max wearing a tiny Christmas sweater. My face, of course, was nowhere in sight. Then the message that followed made it brutally clear. "Miriam, we'll fly just the two of us. Could you dog sit instead? That way, we won't have to worry about boarding him. It'll be easier for you too. No flights, no stress." For a long moment I just stared at the phone. My hands trembled slightly, the steam from my tea rising and blurring the screen. This was no longer subtle. This was open exclusion, wrapped in the insult of being reduced to a dog sitter. I typed back before I could stop myself. "I paid for this entire trip. The cabin, the flights, the activities. And you're telling me I'm not invited?" The dots appeared. Cassidy was typing. I imagined her smirk as she crafted the words. When they appeared, they were cold, detached. A blade, hidden behind politeness. "We just thought it would be less stressful for you, Miriam. It's a long flight. You'd be more comfortable in Chicago." Cole agrees. I held my breath, waiting for my son to correct her. To say, "No, Mom. Of course you're coming. Of course you belong with us." But when his reply came, it was worse than her cruelty. "Mom, Jess thinks it'll be less stressful if you don't come. We want this to be our special trip." "Oh, Jess." He still softened her name, even when she was cutting me out of my own gift. It felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. A hollow ache bloomed in my chest, so sharp it almost felt physical. For years I had been there for them, helping Cole through college when the tuition seemed impossible, guiding him through his first job when he doubted himself, even loaning them money for the down payment on their house when the market was brutal. I had given advice, time, love, sacrifice, and now, at 62, I was reduced to baggage they wanted to leave behind, as though I were a burden too heavy to carry into their picture-perfect holiday. I put the phone down, unable to look at it any longer. My reflection in the darkened window stared back at me, tired eyes rimmed with disbelief. That night, as I lay in bed, memories floated up unbidden. Cole as a boy, no more than 7, his face flushed with excitement as he tore open wrapping paper, then leapt into my arms shouting, "Thank you, Mom." I could still feel his small arms wrapped tight around my neck, the scent of gingerbread and pine in the background. He had looked at me then, as though I were the center of his world. Now, his silence cut deeper than Cassidy's words ever could. The tears came quietly, soaking the pillow, the house so still that even my sobs seemed too loud. For a while, I allowed myself to crumble, to be the mother whose son had chosen someone else's comfort over her dignity. But grief has a strange way of transforming itself when pressed too hard. By the time dawn edged across the sky, the sorrow had cooled into something different. It was no longer just pain, it was resolve, gathering like a storm in the pit of my stomach. I would not beg to be included. I would not allow myself to be erased from what I had built. They thought I was powerless, that I would sit quietly in Chicago with the dog while they played at happiness in Aspen. They were wrong. I did not sleep well after that night. My mind kept looping the same words over and over: Cassidy's cool dismissal, Cole's hesitant agreement, the way they had spoken as though my presence were nothing more than an inconvenience. Rage and hurt spun inside me like twin storms, colliding until sparks began to fly. By morning, the ache in my chest had sharpened into something else: defiance. I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop, Max's steady breathing the only sound in the house. My fingers hovered above the keys, hesitating for a heartbeat, before I pulled up the airline app. 4 tickets blinked back at me. The payment history carried my name. The confirmation emails carried my name. And most importantly, the authority to make changes sat with me alone. One click, and I moved to the cabin reservation. Again, my name. Primary guest, Miriam Cross. Additional guests, Cole Cross, Cassidy Rhodes. A line of digital text, no more, no less. The reservation was mine. The keys to that snow-filled dreamland were mine. They had tried to cut me out of a trip I paid for. But the cruel irony was this: technically, it wasn't their trip at all. It was mine. For a long moment I sat there, staring at the glowing screen, my heartbeat loud in my ears. I could cancel everything. I could erase the whole thing with a few taps, leave them stranded with nothing but their arrogance. But that would punish me too, robbing me of the joy I had imagined. I would not surrender my dream. I would not play the victim. If they wanted to exile me, I would exile them instead. Cleanly, surgically, with precision. A petty revenge, yes, but one that would taste like justice. The thought made me smile, and the smile felt dangerous. Still, a holiday was not meant to be spent alone. My eyes drifted to the phone on the counter, and before I could overthink it, I dialed. "Linda?" My sister's voice came bright and warm across the line, a comfort I hadn't realized I was craving. Linda, 65, a widow too, living in Denver. She was only 2 hours away from Aspen, a woman who had always known how to laugh even through sorrow. "Is everything all right?" she asked, hearing the edge in my voice. I told her everything. Every insult, every cold text, the group chat that had cut me out of my own Christmas. By the time I finished, her voice was trembling with disbelief. "Miriam, they really said that? After all you've done for them?" "Yes," I said simply. "But the booking is mine. The cabin is mine. And I don't intend to waste it." There was a pause, and then she laughed. An open, joyous laugh that filled my kitchen through the phone. So, what are you saying? You want me to come with you? I want someone grateful beside me, I said. Oh, Miriam, she whispered. I would be honored. You have no idea what this means to me. For a moment, I considered Tom and Sarah, my neighbors who were always kind, always thankful when I helped them watch their house or collect their mail. But in my heart, I knew it had to be Linda. Blood and memory. A sister who would understand the weight of this betrayal and the sweetness of this revenge. We spoke for nearly an hour, planning the details, laughing like we hadn't laughed in years. And when I finally ended the call, my cheeks ached from smiling. For the first time in days, I felt whole again. The loneliness had lifted, replaced by a sharp confidence that warmed me more than any fire. Cassidy and Cole thought they had written me out of the story. What they didn't know was that I had the pen in my hand all along, and now I was rewriting the ending. The decision was made, and once it lodged in my heart, there was no hesitation left. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red wine, sat at the dining table, and opened the laptop as though preparing for a performance. My hands no longer trembled. Instead, they moved with the calmness of someone who finally knows her part. The airline app blinked open. 4 names, lined up neatly on the screen. Cole Cross, Cassidy Rhodes, Miriam Cross. 1 empty seat marked for guest. I stared at the list for a long moment, my pulse steady. Then, one by one, I selected the names of my son and his wife. A red button glowed at the corner. Cancel reservation. Click. A warning appeared, asking if I was sure. Delete. The screen refreshed. Their names vanished, like they had never existed. My name remained. Steady. Unmovable. I added Linda in their place, typing her details with a smile that crept wider the further I went. Confirm. The act was almost ceremonial, like sealing a letter or locking a door. Next came the cabin. I logged into Airbnb, the snowy lodge filling my screen. Guest list. Cole and Cassidy. I hovered over the names, then pressed remove. They disappeared, clean and merciless. I typed in Linda's name, her email, her number. A small notification confirmed the change. Guest list updated. It was strange how light I felt. For days I had been weighed down with humiliation and grief. And now it was as if I had shed a heavy coat. Betrayal had bruised me. Yes, but revenge was stitching me whole again. I sat back, breathed deeply, and reached for my phone. The group chat was still open. Cassidy's glossy itinerary, the last message, staring back at me like a taunt. I began to type, the words flowing smooth, precise, sharp. After I paid for the cabin, I unlocked the app. Your seats vanished. The cabin didn't. Merry Christmas. I attached a screenshot, the airline confirmation with Linda's name, the cabin guest list with theirs erased. Proof, clean as ice. Then I pressed send. The explosion came almost instantly. You can't do this. Cassidy's text arrived first, filled with fury. That was our trip. Ours. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Cole's reply followed, frantic, his words tumbling as though typed with shaking hands. Mom, please. Jess didn't mean it like that. We'll include you. Just put us back on. Don't ruin this. I stared at his message, remembering the silence he had given me when I begged him to defend me. His sudden desperation, now, only hardened me further. I typed slowly, deliberately, savoring each word. Number. This is my trip. I'll be spending Christmas with someone grateful. I added nothing more. No explanations, no justifications. Then, with a final flick of my thumb, I blocked the chat. The silence that followed was exquisite. For the first time in weeks, I felt control settle over me like a warm blanket. Cassidy's rage, Cole's panic, their entitlement, all of it could no longer touch me. They had dismissed me as too old, too fragile, too irrelevant. But tonight, they knew the truth. The trip had never been theirs. It was mine all along. And now, so was the victory. When the plane dipped over the Rockies, I pressed my face to the window like a child. The mountains stretched endless, white-capped and serene, as if painted in strokes of silver and blue. Linda leaned across the aisle to catch a glimpse, her eyes shining. "My God, Miriam," she whispered. "You've brought me to a fairy tale." By the time we reached Aspen and drove up the winding road, the cabin came into view, a wooden jewel, nestled among pine trees bowed heavy with snow. Lights twinkled from the windows, golden against the fading dusk, and smoke curled gently from the chimney. It was more magical than the photos had promised. I felt something loosen inside me, as though the house itself had opened its arms to welcome us. Inside, the fireplace glowed alive, crackling as if it had been waiting for us. A tall Christmas tree already stood near the window, branches twinkling with tiny white lights, bare of ornaments, ready for our touch. Linda clasped my hand, squeezing hard. "Miriam, this is perfect." We unpacked slowly, deliberately, as though savoring every step. Boxes of ornaments, stockings I had carried from Chicago, even a garland to drape across the mantel. Soon the cabin was transformed into a sanctuary of red and gold. We drank mulled wine as we worked, the cinnamon and cloves filling the air, our laughter echoing against the timber walls. Later that night, we sat by the fire, two widowed sisters with glasses raised. We spoke of our husbands, mine gone 4 Christmases now, hers 5. The grief was still there, but softer now, wrapped in the warmth of memory. We told stories that made us cry, and others that made us laugh, until our bellies hurt. For the first time in years, I did not feel like the woman left behind. I felt alive, anchored, seen. The days unfolded like a second youth. We walked through the snowy paths, boots crunching, our breath white in the air. We built a snowman on a whim, laughed like schoolgirls when its lopsided grin tilted. In the evenings, we roasted marshmallows over the fire, their sweetness sticking to our fingers. One afternoon we video-called Linda's grandkids, who squealed with delight at the sight of us bundled in scarves, the cabin glowing in the background. Their joy spilled through the screen, warming the room. At night, I would lie in bed and listen to the quiet of the mountains, the silence filled not with loneliness, but with peace. This was not just revenge, it was reclamation. Cassidy had tried to erase me, to turn me into nothing more than a tired babysitter left behind with the dog. But here I was, not erased, not diminished. I had taken what was mine and transformed it into something greater. This holiday was not about them anymore. It was about us, about choosing joy, about sisterhood, about refusing to be invisible. Back in Chicago, I imagined Cole and Cassidy staring out at the snow piling up against their windows. Max, restless, at their feet. I could almost see Cassidy's lips twisted in frustration as she scrolled through Facebook, finding my photos, me and Linda, in front of the tree, mugs of cocoa in our hands, the caption simple, "Christmas at Aspen." The image must have stung. They had expected me to fade quietly into the background while they enjoyed my gift. Instead, they were left with the silence of their house, the weight of a dog's leash, while I lived the Christmas they thought they had stolen. And for the first time in a long time, I felt utterly, gloriously free. On Christmas Eve, as the last light faded over the mountains, Linda and I stood in front of the cabin. The snow glistened like glass under the porch lanterns, and inside, the tree sparkled with ornaments that caught the firelight. I set up my phone on the railing, the timer flashing, and we leaned close together, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes bright with wine and laughter. The shutter clicked, capturing not just a photo, but a truth. 2 women who had survived loss, betrayal, and loneliness, standing strong in joy. I posted it on Facebook with a caption that had been circling in my head all day. I spent Christmas with someone grateful. For a few seconds there was silence. Then the notifications began to chime, one after another, like a chorus of bells. Old friends, neighbors, former colleagues, they all responded. Heart emojis, clapping hands, comments overflowing with warmth. "So glad you're enjoying yourself, Miriam. You deserve it." Beautiful photo. Beautiful ladies. The affirmation washed over me. Not as vanity, but as validation. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. I was still seen. It didn't take long for the phone to ring. Cole's name appeared on the screen, and my chest tightened. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But I answered, my voice steady. Mom? His tone was softer than I had heard in years. Shaky. Uncertain. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. The words caught at me, but not enough to erase the sting of his silence that night in the group chat. I closed my eyes, listening to the hesitation in his breathing, hearing the regret, but also the weakness that had brought us here. Cole, I said slowly. Respect isn't optional. Love without respect means nothing. You need to learn that before we talk again. There was a pause on the line, the sound of him swallowing hard. I understand, he whispered finally. Then the call ended, leaving only the crackle of the fire beside me. Cassidy never called. Not a message, not a word. Her pride was taller than any mountain in Colorado. And strangely, that silence didn't sting. It was almost a relief. I had spent too long twisting myself to fit her sharp edges, hoping she might one day soften. But she hadn't. She wouldn't. And I no longer cared. That night, Linda poured us another glass of wine, and we toasted quietly in front of the tree. Outside, snow fell in soft waves against the window, muffling the world beyond. For the first time in years, I didn't feel manipulated or diminished. I wasn't waiting for scraps of kindness from a son who had forgotten how to stand tall, or from a daughter-in-law who had never known gratitude. I felt free. Entirely, gloriously free. I leaned back in my chair, watching the flames dance, and realized something. Revenge had been sweet. Yes, but this was sweeter. This was reclamation. I had not only taken back my trip, I had taken back myself. And as Christmas Eve settled into night, I whispered a small promise into the quiet. Never again would I let anyone decide my worth. When Christmas morning came, I rose early, wrapped in a quilt, and sat by the cabin window with a mug of coffee. The snow outside was fresh, layered thick on the pines, soft and untouched, as though the world had been remade overnight. For a long while, I simply sat there, listening to the quiet. In that silence, I heard my own heart more clearly than I had in years. I had once believed that my worth was measured by whether I was included, that being invited, needed, depended upon, that was love. But this Christmas stripped away that illusion. Inclusion without respect is only pity in disguise, and pity is no gift at all. Respect, I realized, is not something you beg for. Sometimes, it must be demanded, even if the demand comes in the form of a sharp, well-placed act of petty revenge. Linda stirred awake a little later, humming as she moved about the kitchen, frying eggs and humming carols off-key. Watching her bustle around in her slippers, I felt something tender settle inside me. Family is not always blood. Sometimes family is the person who stands beside you when others turn away. The one who looks at your gift and says thank you, instead of asking for more. We spoke that morning of making this a tradition. Every year, perhaps, we would come back to Aspen, to this cabin or another like it, and make Christmas ours. A season not of compromise, not of playing small, but of celebration. For us. For the ones who still understood gratitude. I thought of Cole, of Cassidy's silence, of the cold edge in their voices. Perhaps one day, he would learn what respect meant. Perhaps one day, he would come back, not with excuses, but with sincerity. But I no longer pinned my peace on that possibility. My life was too precious, my years too finite, to waste on people who could not see my worth. The fire crackled. Linda handed me a plate, and I felt an odd, almost rebellious joy bloom in me. I was no longer just a widow, no longer just a mother pushed aside. I was Miriam Cross, and I had reclaimed my Christmas, my dignity, my laughter. For years, I let myself believe that being needed meant being loved. But this Christmas, I learned something better. I'd rather be valued than used. And trust me, snow falls sweeter when you spend Christmas with someone grateful. There comes a time in life when you realize that love without respect is no love at all. I once believed that being needed meant being valued, but I learned the hard way that sometimes people confuse your kindness for weakness. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. And yes, a small act of revenge can become a lesson, not in spite, but in dignity. At my age, I've learned that peace comes not from being included at any cost, but from choosing to be with those who are truly grateful. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more grandma revenge stories.